My Lords, at the election we were promised change, and we constantly hear that is the mantra of the government. But what's fascinating is that this government has carried on the same approach to IPP as the last one, which was a sort of mealy-mouthed attempt at a little measured movement, but actually nothing dynamic. And the same sense of risk, which Lady Burt has referred to, and Lord Boylan, persists with this so-called changed government. What is the change that has taken place on IPP sentencing? A complicated, convoluted system of changed possible tariffs. But as this report indicates, for those who can possibly understand what it means, it doesn't really work. And as one who visits prisons at least 3 times a month, I can tell you that talking to IPP prisoners, they don't understand it. They don't get it, and they feel a deep sense of despair. We learned today from reporting by both the BBC and Sky that President Assad held 100,000 people in prison. And yesterday, this government announces it wants to hold 109,000 people in prison. What does that say about us? That our inclination, exactly as Lady Burt said, the culture is to entrap people and effectively persecute them. Because there are, at the moment, according to the House of Lords Library, 2/3 of those on IPP sentences who have never been released for over 10 years. Put any of us in the same position where we were held for a 10-year sentence and then another 10 years, would we be fit for training? Would we have the right approach? Would our mind be ready for release? We'd be screwed up. And the government wants to pretend that this equals change. It doesn't equal change. It equals sitting back and giving in to the panic of the public. What the minister needs to do, in a way, is kind of look to his army of civil servants around him, who I'm sure are very wise but not very risky, because they're not inclined to meet real people and understand how real people feel and deal with it. Unlike the Secretary of State, who was pictured yesterday rushing around prisons with officers around her to protect her from meeting offenders, I really sit with offenders. What I hear from real offenders and real people is they don't get it. This doesn't equal anything new, there is no hope in it, and they feel great despair. The culture, unfortunately, is if we can return people back, over 1,000, what's the latest figure? Let me give the accurate figure from the library resource, 1,599 recalled to prison. That is basically saying this sentence doesn't exist any longer. We're no longer sending anybody down through the courts, but actually, oh, goodness me, you did something terrible 15 years ago, tap, tap, back you go. What kind of mindset is that of change? It's not change. I had a very interesting note from a prisoner inside, because I sit with prisoners, talk to them, they write to me, and they tell me their real lives. And one prisoner was going through in great detail what's wrong with the system. So I'm going to read just a little bit of this person's letter, in which he refers to from a adult prison. He says, another in which a young man was told on release to go and pick up his property from a police station on the day of release, consisting of a phone, and later the same day his hostel room, which he was required to attend, was searched by staff, finding in it the phone in a sealed police bag. Not being able to have more than one phone, he was recalled. Goodness me, 6 months then had to pass before he could be considered for an appeal. That is the culture of a probation system and a prison system and a ministerial system and the civil servants who sit there pontificating about this but don't meet and deal with human beings. For goodness sakes, what we need is some sense of generosity of spirit. Keep in the dangerous ones, let out the majority.